These 5 companies are making millions of dollars selling 3D printed products to real end-use customers. Many people think that 3D printing is a hobby, but it's not. It's a means of production. And there are companies making everything from motorcycle gear to automotive suspensions with regular 3D printing. And in this video, we're going to talk about these few companies who have really pushed it to the limit and built real businesses off of 3D printed items. Have you ever made a 3D printed part that needs to have a car dropped on it a few 100,000 times? These guys did. Let's go ahead and talk about Perry Parts. Perry Parts may actually be one of the best 3D printed products we've ever seen because they are able to leverage all the factors of 3D printing. They're able to make a really good quality product because they're able to design geometry that wasn't possible before. They're able to address niches and they're able to iterate really quickly to evolve that product over time. And we're gonna look at all of those inside of this video. But before that, let's go ahead and just talk about where Perry Parts got started. So Perry Parts was started in 2020 by Patrick Perry, who was working on a GX470. He had to go on an off-roading trip and he lost the bump stop in his vehicle. He ended up 3D printing one out of TPU that held up better than he had expected, so he decided to keep on iterating on it. Over the next year or so, he released to the broader community with a bunch of continuous feedback. He kept on improving it. And then by 2022, he had kind of final products and was starting to refine the final production process in order to produce more and more bump stops, eventually creating hundreds of designs and producing thousands of orders. But let's roll back even further. What the heck is a bump stop? Well, if you are an off-roader, you are driving your vehicle through very harsh terrain where the suspension is pushed right to its limit. When the suspension is fully compressed, it hits the end. The spring is fully compressed and now you're just basically metal against metal. The bump stop is the last little bit of range. It is a small rubber cap, effectively, that is able to be squashed just a little bit more to make sure that you don't have metal on metal so you're not beating up your vehicle. You actually have a small kind of final spring and stop so that everything can come to a stop before the whole vehicle bumps around. It really smooths up the ride and makes sure that you reduce the damage on your vehicle. Normal cars have this too so that the suspension doesn't just shoot through the hood of your car, but those solutions are either a solid rubber cap or a really expensive option, which is a hydraulic ram that compresses just a little bit, which can cost hundreds of dollars. Perry Parts has managed to create a solution that is better than all of those while also still being more affordable. So let's go ahead and look at the Perry Parts bump stops. There is an incredible amount of engineering in the actual design of it, which we'll get to here in just a moment, but first of all, I want to talk about the actual material itself. They're using thermoplastic polyurethane, which is effectively a rubber, but it's a really durable type of rubber. TPU is one of the best materials in the world for 3D printing because it's very UV resistant, very chemically resistant, and it's able to take a ton of abuse. So it's a good baseline material. But Perry Parts took this even further. They don't actually print with TPU filament as many 3D printing people would expect them to. This is actually quite odd, but also not. Every time plastic is melted and then turned solid again, it loses some of its molecular adherence effectively. The polymer chains inside of it get broken shorter and shorter every time you heat it and cool it, which means it gets weaker and it can become embrittled and just softer and gets weirder. You see this in PLA to where you have very low temperature melting PLAs because it's been processed so many times. But Perry Parts wanted to avoid this degradation of having stuff extruded over and over again. And in order to do that, they had to extrude it just once, which means that you have to put injection molding pellets into the machine. That wasn't really available at the time when they were working on it, so they went ahead and built their own custom fused pellet fabrication machines so that they could feed in injection molding TPU, extrude it just once so you maintain as much of the strength and the natural characteristics of the material as you can, and turn it directly into the part. This is both really efficient because they have low material cost, but it's just better because it improves the engineering quality of the material of the part. And that contributes to the durability and the affordability of the design. But now let's actually go into the engineering of this. Perry Parts takes full advantage of 3D printing. You know how we talked about how all other cars generally have like a solid rubber cap inside of there that doesn't really compress at all any more than rubber compresses? Perry Parts is able to completely move beyond that and actually dynamically change how the part behaves. Instead of having a solid brick of rubber, they are able to change it so that it kind of has an internal spring. They're able to use Infill, custom designed, engineered, CAD designed Infill, but Infill nonetheless. So that as the stops are compressed, the Infill progressively gets harder and harder and harder and twists and bends and compresses,
so that the part is not just squashing material, it's squashing a mechanical mechanism that controls the material, where it goes, how it spreads, how it breaks. So you get a lot more durability, and you get a ride feel and bump stop behavior that is way more gentle on the material and leads to a better ride. This is actually really incredibly brilliant, because if you look at the Perry Parts bump stops, they couldn't actually be molded because they have internal geometry that cannot possibly be molded because you can't reach inside of a part with a mold. But they also have external geometry, the ripples on the inside of the bump stops, that is also stupidly difficult to mold, if not outright impossible. But these features make the bump stops so much better and leverage the process that they're being made with so that you can get characteristics that would not exist any other way. You have full control of the engineering. And that full control is stupidly important because Perry Parts has gone through many iterations of all of their bump stops, and that is only possible with 3D printing. If he had been manufacturing it traditionally, he would have had to get tools, dies, all that kind of stuff set up, and it would have been tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars just to build that tooling, and then you get your first parts off, and then you cannot change them again until you hit some critical mass. But Perry Parts is able to create very bespoke and very focused sort of solutions without having to do all of that tooling because they're able to use 3D printing. It's also worth noting the inserts on the Perry Parts bump stops. They use 3D printed threads, which is kind of odd for 3D printed parts, but it makes total sense in the context of the engineering. They use printed threads because bump stops are in compression. Those threads are not being pulled, they're not going to be stripped out in any sort of way. They're being tightened down against the main bar of the vehicle. So literally, the only thing the threads need to do is retain the part, hold it on there, make sure it doesn't break off, and make sure it doesn't slide from side to side. You do not have to over-engineer when you do not have to over-engineer. This is subtle, but it's also often overlooked. Many people would look at these parts and say, we need to embed a bolt into it. But that embedding of the bolt can radically increase the cost, radically increase the complexity, and not really help it that much. This part needs to be screwed onto a thing and just held there. And then since it's being pressed on, those threads will never actually really be stressed because it's backstopped. It's just a nice little nugget of engineering and design optimization that I really appreciate. Perry Parts is also really unique in the context of 3D printed pieces because their parts are actually heavily qualified. They test their designs by running them through a compression dynamometer, where they're able to hit them 100,000 times to make sure they're still holding up and the designs will hold up over time. This is a level of qualification that most designers never really go to in many of the designs that they create. But it's an indicator of some of the early capabilities of 3D printing that they can pass these types of tests. And again, they're parts that are in compression, so you don't have to deal with layer adhesion types of issues in the same sort of way. You have to deal with fatigue across the layer lines, but that's a different issue. But the fact that Perry Parts are so heavily qualified and quantified is something to really be commended because they're creating engineering quality parts that are proven to be engineering quality parts. There's a lot more that we could say about the Perry Parts engineering, down to the actual pattern that they're using for their infill, because it's a very specific sort of pattern designed for compression and spreading out a load in a very specific way. But that kind of goes beyond the scope of this video. So let's actually run into the actual product and business of Perry Parts. Up to this point, Perry Parts has sold about 4,000 orders, and now we don't know how many of those things are inside of each one of the orders, but that is a solid business. And it is made even more solid by a very simple fact that these bump stops are more affordable than other options out there on the market. The alternatives you have are OEM bricks of rubber, or kind of custom and expensive hydraulic ram bump stops that are 3 to 4 times more expensive than what Perry Parts is making. They have been able to create a mechanism that is printed as a solid part. This is the magic of 3D printing, to create these really compliant sorts of pieces and mechanisms to where you can turn many parts into one single simple part that is more robust and more affordable. And this is one of the superpowers of 3D printing that many people don't realize. Most folks use 3D printing to produce something that already exists, rather than using 3D printing to combine and evolve something that already exists. But there's even more nuggets in the business model that are just stupidly impressive and wildly enabled by the technology. The main one is a core principle of Perry Parts, which is continuous improvement. They are able to test, they are able to change the design, they're able to update the design, and then they're able to test again and do this continuously without having to worry about tooling or fixed manufacturing costs. They're able to move and evolve really quickly to create the products that people need. Again, also, since they do not have that tooling, they're able to create large numbers of products. Once they have the core technology, that compressive infill inside of it figured out, they're able to make one for Toyota, one for Lexus, one for Ford, to where the bump stops for that vehicle need to be different from the bump stops on that vehicle. Perry Parts is able to chase the long tail. Oh, you have that old vehicle from the 1990s that there's only 2,000 of them left over in the world. We can make a bump stop for that. This is incredibly powerful, and people don't leverage this enough with 3D printing. The fact that you're able to do more with less. And when you're working in one of these niches, you're able to scale up as the niche grows, and you're able to grow at your own pace. Perry Parts does not have to sell more parts unless they want to create a design for another new vehicle, because they can saturate each one of the vehicles as quickly as they want to. And as the business gets more word of mouth and continues to grow and has YouTube videos made about it, they can grow their existing stock and scale up very easily because 3D printing is far more scalable than many people realize. Ultimately, Perry Parts is an accessories business. And if you have watched this channel for a very long time, you know that accessories businesses are one of the best places for 3D printing because there are so many different things to be made to help improve existing products. Organizers, accessories, caps, cases, all of those types of products are stupidly enabled by 3D printing. And Perry Parts is one of the purest examples of this, because they have a deeply engineered product that addresses a real need of people. They're able to do it more affordably and in a less complicated way than other options. So how do you make this stick onto this in order to create $1 million business with over 800 different products? We're gonna talk about that in this video today. So ChinMounts is an excellent case study in how to use 3D printing to actually create a large business and to do it sustainably and in a really economic fashion. But before that, let's actually talk about the problem that they're trying to solve. This is the issue. There's about 500,000 motorcycles sold each year inside the United States, and there's somewhere between 5 and 8 million registered motorcycles at any given time. And within the motorcycling subculture, you have a real big group of fans who love action cams, and it's very useful on TikTok and all the rest of it to share your rides. But there is a problem. In order to get a GoPro mounted onto your motorcycle, historically, you've always had kind of the option of mounting it up here on top or mounting it on the side. Both of these sort of suck because they mess with your airflow and create a bunch of drag on your head as you're going down the street. So the very best way of mounting a camera is straight on the front of the chin. Now, the issue with this is that every single motorcycle helmet is a little bit different right here. They have a different curvature because they're styled, they're designed, they have different aerodynamic properties, whatever the motorcycle brand that you're using, whether it's a Bell or HJC or whatever. Which means that you have a problem mounting onto it. Because if you create an accessory that perfectly fits with this helmet, it will not perfectly fit with some other helmet. So if you are wanting to solve this problem, you basically need an accessory to mount this camera onto the chin of every single motorcycle helmet out there. And there are a lot. But there is a technology that's able to do this. This all brings us up to Matthew Engledge, who in 2019 had this problem. How do you mount a GoPro to the front of a helmet and do it reliably across multiple different helmets? Engledge was able to design an initial mount and use his home 3D printer in order to create the first version of it, basically scanning or reverse engineering the chin of a helmet in order to design the first chin plate. He was able to share it around, get a little bit of attention, and ended up starting to sell them. And this is where it started to break loose. Other writers loved it, and in a niche that is so focused and so loved and so has such a passionate group of people inside of it, if you have a product that works really well there, it's going to get attention, and it's going to be shared, and there's going to be word of mouth going around all over the place. So after the release of the first design, Engledge decided to keep on creating more designs, and this is a really nifty business model, because effectively what you can do is you can purchase the helmet, 3D scan it, design the plate from that scan, and then send the helmet back in order to create a lot of these variations, which allows you to create a bunch of accessories that cannot be produced any other way. This is something that is unique to 3D printing. Historically, if Engledge had wanted to do this, he would have had to create a mold for every single helmet that was out there, which means that he would have had a $10,000 expense before he would even get the first product out the door, and then have that multiplied by what is now over 800 different products. 800 different molds at $10,000 a pop. He would have had to spend $8 million in order to create all the products that he is selling right now. $8 million you would have to earn back in order to just break even, but that's not even becoming profitable. That's just to break even on the startup cost, not including marketing and growth and buying more machinery and so on and so forth, and shipping and packing, blah, 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 all this stuff. But all of that cost was zero because he was using printing. But there have been several clever business model tweaks that ChinMounts has used in order to make 3D printing even more scalable. And we'll talk about them in just a second, but I want to emphasize what 3D printing was able to do for him. Inglage had to build racks of 3D printers in order to produce this part, but it doesn't have to be done anymore. Here at Slant 3D, we recently released a product called Portals, where anyone who creates a model can just upload it and have it for sale in about 30 seconds. All you need is a 3D model, and then you find out how much it costs, you set the price, and then it is for sale, and you start making royalties from the sales of the real prints of that model. When a customer buys the item, it is printed in one of our giant print farms and then delivered directly to the customer for you. You do not have to do customer support, you don't have to deal with sales tax, you don't have to deal with shipping, you don't have to run a print farm. All you have to do is create a model and then upload it. If this had existed in 2019, Inglage would not have had to create his own printing infrastructure to run ChinMounts. He could have just uploaded the model and shared it with his friends and then started uploading 800 more models and would have had all the infrastructure built out for him without having to build it himself. So if you are creating a nifty product or have designed some nifty little niche tool, you might consider uploading it to Portals. That way you don't have to build all of the manufacturing infrastructure yourself. But let's get back to what Inglage actually did in order to make this scalable. Sure, they're using 3D printing, but people have a bad kind of connotation with 3D printing, even though it has all of these benefits. It is a thing that is mounted onto the chin with an expensive camera on the end of it. What if that 3D print breaks? Well, if you're designing the parts appropriately, it's not a problem at all. But even more than that, what Inglage was able to do is not 3D print the entire part. The only thing that matters was the base plate that mounts onto the helmet chin that needs that curvature. Everything else can be kind of standard parts. So what they did at ChinMounts is that they designed that base plate, that mounting plate, but then they have third-party parts that then interface with the camera and everything else that can be tensioned and torqued and twisted and change angles. But these have a tremendous advantage in that they're kind of off the shelf so that they can be produced really reliably, be universal across all the 800 SKUs of base plates, which allow them to interface with the helmet, and that allows you to have an upsell. A typical chin mount can generally go for somewhere between $35 and $60, which is kind of a lot, but also not. It's really useful. The GoPro costs somewhere between $200 and $500. The helmet also costs that, unless somebody's being an idiot and not taking care of their brains correctly. So in the context of the kit, you want the part to be right. And in fact, if it was priced like a 3D printed part where it was 2 cents or something like that, then it would appear cheap and people wouldn't purchase it or trust it. And ChinMounts also wouldn't have the incentive to do a really good quality product. So it's important to maintain pricing where it's reasonable and sustainable and scalable. Because also there is a lot of upfront work that goes into the design of one of these things. Scanning a helmet and then turning it into a 3D printed model is not nothing, and people need to realize the amount of investment that still goes into creating one of these chin mounts when it might only sell maybe a few hundred or even a few thousand units over its lifetime. But what I want to emphasize with this is that the combination of 3D printed parts with third-party parts allows the final product to be much more valuable than what it would be independently. If ChinMounts just sold the base plates, they'd have some value there, but it wouldn't be a complete set. Since they're selling the complete set, they have the opportunity for upsells, the product becomes more valuable overall, and you have the benefits of 3D printing, which is able to create really custom features and connections with high numbers of SKUs, combined with third-party parts and universal pieces so that you can upsell and create real value from it by turning it into a full cohesive product experience. And this is obviously working for ChinMounts. On their website, they have over 3,000 great reviews. And if you reverse engineer reviews, as in about 1 out of 10 people will offer a review, generally on average, then you're looking at about 30,000 total orders. So it's turned into a real solid business that Matt Inglage has been able to grow over the last few years and can continue to grow. Action sports are a huge market with really passionate people. They have and can and are expanding into all these other places where a camera needs to be mounted to some weird curved surface, and it's really difficult to get that done with traditional methods. But 3D printing allows you to create a large number of SKUs that can be stored and chase down the long tail of designs so that you have a custom accessory to an existing loved brand to allow people to get a better experience out of all of it together. And that allows you to create something really high value that's very profitable and can still be produced at scale using 3D printing. It's awesome to see these types of products out there. Comment down below if you know of other real world 3D printed parts that people don't really realize are 3D printed. It was awesome looking into ChinMounts because yes, they're 3D printed, but it's not like an obvious or front forward part of the site. It's an enabling technology to what they're creating. And this is something we always love to talk about on the channel. So a fishing reel needs a rod, right? Well, not necessarily. Today we're gonna look at a real 3D printed product that is actually a rodless fishing reel and talk about the design of it in order to make it manufacturable, how it could be improved, and how they could probably solve the problem of being sold out right now. So the Go Reel is a product made by Crystal Creek Outfitting. It is a rodless fishing reel, which is basically just the reel itself, and then you can bait it and toss it out however you want to. These types of reels are really useful for backpacking or camping where you need something that is low volume, low effort. A whole fishing rod doesn't fold up very well, whereas a rodless reel can be really useful because you can just throw it in your pocket and then you've got it whenever you need it. It is made with a small tackle box, so the bait, the reel, the line, the hook, and everything else can all go into one single tight little cylinder. It is a fantastic package that is enabled by 3D printing. But let's go ahead and dive into the actual design of this whole thing. First of all, the reel itself. The reel itself is not just a reel. A lot of people think of a reel like you do a filament reel, 2 flat sides and that's all there is. But since this thing actually has to allow you to cast, it is a semi-triangular sort of reel, where one side of it is slanted just a little bit so that the line can easily fly off of the reel when you cast it. But then in addition to this, the center holes of the reel look like a lightweighting feature, but that's not what they are. They are actually a piece of ergonomics to where your fingers can insert into the reel and you can handle it one-handed and still cast effectively. So you put the reel on the end of your fingers right there, and then you can turn it that way and throw, and you're actually able to cast it some distance. These are subtleties of the design that are indicative of somebody who really understands the problem that they're designing, whereas somebody who just came in and designed the thing probably couldn't create something this reliable, this good, and this intentional about how it's made, which is why it's so important to design products about problems that you already know. The tackle box itself is designed really well with good grips on the outside. I'm not actually able to tell the resolution that they're printing it in, but I would probably recommend that they add some texture to the outside of it, and this would allow people with wet hands to get a hold of it easier. In this case, layer lines and texturing, things that come for free with 3D printing, really help to improve the product overall. They could apply knurling to the outside, or just a little bit of fuzzy skin, whatever it happens to be. A lot of textures are available so that when your hand is wet, muddy, and slimy, you can still get a hold of your tackle box and your reel and everything else that you need. Now, I would like to look at the branding that they have on these. You can see the Crystal Creek logo on the top of each one of these things. It's fantastic, except for one problem. It's in a different color. Now, that is fine, and I understand that. It's very alluring to print it in a different color, but it radically slows down your production process and limits you in how many ways you can produce this. And this is a perfect moment to mention our 3D print on demand app, Teleport. Teleport could really be helping out the Crystal Creek guys, because right now their entire store is sold out and they're not able to get them selling again. When you're sold out, that means there's demand out there to get a hold of it. You don't want to take a break at that moment. You want to scale up. Teleport is for that. They could just upload the models to Teleport, and whenever they get an order, we would print and ship those items directly to their customer for them. This would give them all sorts of new options, and it would allow them to get access to thousands of 3D printers without having to pay for it at all, since Teleport is a free product. Now, the trick to this is that they would actually have to design the product to be a single color in order to use Teleport, because we don't do multicolor printing. But in order to still get the logo, they could just lift that logo just a little bit off the bed so that the first layer is printed and then the second layer is printed on the next layer. So you still have that contrast with the logo embedded on it, but it can still be printed on a service like Teleport so that they can scale up and get out of that problem of being sold out. If you want to try using Teleport for your own business, it's free to sign up for. Just go over to slantpod.com and try it out today. That way you don't have to deal with running your own print farm. You can just design awesome products like the Crystal Creek reel and then sell them and know that you have the scale to support yourself without having to pack all the boxes or keep your machines operational. But this problem that Crystal Creek has is really, really good. Being sold out is fantastic. But something I noticed on their website is they have really good photography, really good product photos, and a product that is really demonstrable. This is something that you really like in products today. The Go Reel needs to be cast, and it needs to be packed up, and it needs to be unpacked. It's very demonstrable in the video world that we live in right now. And if you can find products like that, that's always what you want, because the cost of marketing is so little, hence why they're sold out right now. They also did a really smart thing, and they opened up up wholesale down at the bottom of their website. This means that retailers can reach out to them and purchase the product in bulk. Again, this is a situation where you want to use larger print farms or want to make sure you have the manufacturing capacity available to support those orders, which is a thing that we do all the time for folks. And the Go Reel is such a perfect product for this because it actually can be merchandised. It can be put on shelves and not take up a lot of room. So it can be put into Bass Pro Shops or other gear shops like that, where it can get into retail and people can just see it wandering by. Because even though the organic reach that its videos have, it's not always enough, and being in a store is really useful. But ultimately, the Go Reel is just a fantastic product. It has all the good qualities of a product. It's very intentional. It has features that you can't get a hold of otherwise, and they've been able to use 3D printing to create geometries that weren't possible before. The simple fact that it's so lightweight because it's a 3D printed part is an incredible advantage in this situation when you're dealing with camping and hiking gear where every ounce matters. And it's exciting to see them grow to such a level that they're actually being sold out now. Hopefully we can help them with that because they do have the margins absolutely to deal with it. If you have a product that you're looking to scale up, go ahead and check out Teleport over at slantpod.com. That'll let you focus on designing awesome products and not have to worry about taking care of all of the production yourself.
This 3D printed product is helping save lives. As a paramedic, you have to act quickly and decisively. But in the chaos of an emergency, disorder just creeps in. You're prepping meds, you're trying to find veins, you're trying to get people out of the way as you go towards the ambulance. And on top of it all, you're trying to find a steady place to put your IV while you push some adrenaline to restart the hearts of that concussion victim who has a 3rd-degree fracture. Now that all the real paramedics out there are mad at me, I seriously want to go into the MedicMate. This is an awesome device that was designed by the Flatline company up in Canada. It is designed to hold syringes basically anywhere you need them to be while you're working in the back of an ambulance or at a scene. It has all kinds of nifty little quirks in it that allow it to be really useful in keeping your space organized rather than falling into the chaos and trying to chase down a particular syringe at any given moment. That is the first and core main feature. There are color-coded clamps on the side of it all that are for setting several different sizes of syringes. This allows you to pre-prep meds before you get to the scene so that they're right there easily pulled whenever you need them at the scene. And it's not just the 3D printed clips. This has to be a reliable system. So they've also input bungees that allow you to hold in the syringes so that they can't get knocked loose and knocked out. It's all a really stable, robust kind of a system. But that's not the only thing it does. This is perfectly designed by somebody who obviously works inside of the industry. On the other side of it, there are more bungees which allow you to clamp it up to the side of a pole. And there's a TPU pad so that it doesn't slip up and down that pole. That way you can mount it up someplace and then hang the IV bag above it. And then there are clips on the side that allow you to clip on to the IV drip chamber. This puts all of your syringes and the IV all in one single stable spot to where you can get a hold of it and pull it and then push some medication into the IV line. And this is where the little tricks keep on coming, because on the side there is a cap grabber where you just shove the syringe up into it, twist, and then it will hold the cap inside of there. Or you can then take the ends of the caps and screw them onto several other places that allow it to hold the ends of the caps where you need them to be while you are pushing your meds into the IV. These are all very small tweaks that are very subtle but very well designed. Once you're done using the meds in some stable situation and you want to move the patient along, it has a good belt clip that's actually really well designed because it works with all the standard kind of belts and then any sort of moulet kit that you might have. But what I appreciate about this belt clip is that it is actually kind of one directional. They have this wonderful zigzag pattern down at the bottom that you don't always see in belt clips, so that it actually holds onto the belt clip and doesn't slide up and down involuntarily. It takes a decision to pop it off of the belt, which is really, really useful because the whole point of this is to make sure stuff is not going someplace on its own unless you decide for it to go that way. And the final cherry on top, which is just a little bungee that you can put a carabiner onto. Ultimately, what we want to show off with this is that this is an excellent example of a very intentionally designed product for a very specific niche in the world. A first responder was able to create a product that they are now able to make and sell and produce. And it's actually better than anything someone else would have created because someone else probably just doesn't have the same amount of context in it. And this is what's so powerful about 3D printing. You today are able to recognize problems in your own life, design a product for it, and then if you do not want to have to sell it yourself or build a business around it, you can just upload the files to a place like Teleport so that people who do not have access to the prints can purchase them from you. But this is an incredible enabling capability because it's never been possible before. The quality of 3D printing and the scale of 3D printing services that are available now has never been available before. But it makes these types of products possible. And in addition to that, since this product is now digital, it's not stuck in a mold or something else,
Flatline Co. can continue to iterate and evolve this product only by uploading a new file and not having to cut a new tool for it. And Flatline Co. is doing this. They have several different versions of the MedicMate, from a mini one to just a full maxed out one, but the core functionality is there and they're able to continue designing for themselves, and if other people want it, they are able to get a hold of one. This is incredibly enabling to people so that they can create products that are necessary for what they are doing.
This is selling in Walmart. This is the StressNut. It's a fidget toy designed by Nelson Diaz, who is a DJ and producer down in Miami, Florida. He created this about a year ago when he had gotten into 3D printing and he had made this fidget toy to kind of mess with himself. A few other artists looked at it and they really liked it because as creatives, very often we have a lot of loose hands and we need something to do. And this is way better than a lot of other fidget spinners out there because it actually has an ASMR kind of component to it, so it has a really great amount of interaction. So once he started to see the interest from it, Papa Nelson decided to go ahead and take a year and just develop this. So he started collaborating with a number of different artists, and that allowed him to get a lot more distribution. They perfected the design a little bit and they ended up creating a print farm in order to actually produce these, initially starting with Bamboo Labs machines because they were fast and easy. First of all, let's go ahead and just look at the design of this thing. Overall, it's a very good design. It's very manufacturable. Since it's only two pieces, which is very simple, it's easy to get produced and to produce at scales. But each feature of it is actually already pretty good. The text is on the side for the most part, and the threads themselves are large and chunky and easy with a fairly low tolerance between the two pieces, so you don't have to worry about fit and feel or anything like that to still get that really nice spin and connection. It also, as a design itself, has so many components that are just really good. As we mentioned before, there's the joy of having something actually occur as you screw something on, but it also has a lot of satisfying features. Both the sound of itself, even though it's plasticky, sounds great, and then if you do that flick and have it connect, it's a lot more satisfying than other fidget spinners. A traditional fidget spinner just is not as good because you set it spinning and that's great, but then it's just kind of there. It doesn't really give you feedback after that first flick. Whereas this thing you can just diddle around with, and it's kind of like working with a Rubik's Cube without the stress of dealing with a Rubik's Cube. So it's a really good design for a toy, even though it's a really simple concept. And generally, the simpler the concept, the better. If you are getting into complexity, then you have all kinds of problems. But the other benefit of this also is that it's very expandable. Since they made this original StressNut, they've introduced some new versions, including the Grip Nut, which is a lot meatier. And since it's such a simple and basic design, they can expand it to make it more topical to particular sorts of holidays. So they actually did the Egg Nut last Easter, which is a really good variation on this in order to keep the sales up once everybody kind of has one. Because it is a product that you don't really sell twice very often. Once somebody has one, they generally just need the one. So as I said, DJ Nelson, once he got this idea and had it rolling, he decided to take a year off from music producing in order to pursue this idea and a few others. He actually does a lot of stuff, both electric motorcycles, speakers, you name it, he's messing around with it. So fidget toys were really not that big of a stretch. As I said, they initially built out a large print farm in order to produce them, but they actually started running into roadblocks around enough electricity to run all of the machines, which is why they ended up reaching out to us to discuss this project of how to get them produced, because they were looking at large orders from Walmart. They had been doing test orders and they'd already sold out 2,000 of these, so there was a lot of demand and they were going to need to scale up because there were a lot of other deals coming down the pipe. And again, since Nelson was able to work with other DJs, he automatically has an influencer network to where if a celebrity DJ is using one of these, that's a huge amount of free marketing, even though it's something really useful for that celebrity. It's the best type of product in that regard. You're not shilling it out there. People just like it and they use it, and then that promotes it. The word of mouth carries itself. But that extra demand was going to stretch the capacity that they had because individual print farms turn into a large job after a little while, regardless of what machines you have, because building out a factory is not a simple thing. It is not just putting machines up on shelves, it's building all the infrastructure and logistics around it. Everything from making sure that the parts are good quality to getting them into the package for Walmart. So working with a third-party manufacturer was a reasonable option for them to go and explore. So overall, this is just a really good example of a product that people can really get a laugh latched onto. Nelson had the marketing in place. He also had the business acumen to do it and the wherewithal to get started with something. But from that, they were able to take a 3D printed product and carry it all the way into Walmart, which many people don't consider feasible, even though right now mass production printing can absolutely produce these types of products in as big of volumes as necessary. So the idea that like 3D printing isn't ready for final consumer products is just incorrect, because it's being done all the time. And there's so many other options and products like this that very often we talk about on this channel, but they're just great examples of what can be done with 3D printing in order to avoid having to do molds so that you can have a lot more flexible products that evolve over time while also still creating really great products. Have a great day, everybody.